No, you have to turn it on.
It is.
Oh, no, you still have to test. Yep.
I just have to talk louder. It's got a fuzzy thing in front of it. My name is Donna Brandelli, and I'm the chair of the 350th Committee. Some of you look familiar, and you know who I am, and thank you for coming back. Others are new, and welcome for joining us. And we started this series of year-long events in June 2024 at the beginning of our church's 350th year in the Stonington community. We wanted to engage more with the community and open our church and presentations free to all. We have been and will continue having monthly presentations of different types, and everyone is welcome. They'll always be free. They're on the first Sunday of the month at 4:30 through May, and then in June, we'll be celebrating our Founders event with a church fair on June 7th. So please mark your calendars. We'd love to have you there again. Then there will be another new series of presentations that we still haven't put together yet, but we will be doing monthly presentations once again, and everyone is again invited to come. If you need to keep an eye on it, there's Facebook ads that are going out. You can also go to our website, which is fccstonington.org or First Congregational Church Stonington.org. And we just wanted to make sure everybody knows that they're welcome here, and we love that everyone's taking advantage of our community and our presentations because we've had such a wonderful series of people that have come about and helped us out here. What I would like to do is introduce you to Reverend Dr. Mark Paritsky. He's our new pastor. He's just started with us, and we love having him here. He'd love to say a few words.
Right, so none of you are familiar to me. I did literally just start. Reverend Doctor is very kind. I'm the chaplain at Lawrence Memorial and Westerly Hospitals and do this as an interim part-time service just because I miss the worship of church, and I love old traditional churches and gathering in that way. And would love to have a chance to meet anyone that would be interested. But more, I'm just glad that you're here. The last time we had one of these events, I had come in overnight from Mexico and was delayed in San Antonio overnight and made it here by about 12 minutes. So it's grateful to have you here today, and blessings to you, and thanks for being part of the history of Stonington today.
Thank you. So now I'd like to introduce our presenter today. Some of you may be familiar with his work, and some of you may never have heard of him before. Michael Carroll, tall guy over here with a hat. He discovered, or I would say he created Rediscovering History, which is a 501c3 organization which is located in Columbia, Connecticut. It was started by Michael in 2020, and it's dedicated to the preservation of neglected and or damaged, lost, unkept gravestones and cemeteries throughout Connecticut and beyond. He's done work in New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts? Have you been?
Sure. That'll be up there.
Okay, okay, all right. So to date, he's worked on over 1,000 gravestones, helping to pay respect to the past and keeping the memories of those before us alive and known. I know personally that Michael goes above and beyond. Once he finds out information about people, he really starts researching and tries to share that information with everybody on Find a Grave and everywhere else. So presenting on gravestone and cemetery preservation, in addition to the finer details pertaining to gravestones, Michael Carroll, his wife Lisa over here, and he does also work with Larry Hunter, who works with the Rhode Island Historical Cemetery Commission. They're going to go into depth about the different types of gravestones, the symbolism attached to the various stones, the techniques utilized by the team when it comes to finding the lost stones, and more. Their focus will be on stones that can be found in southeastern Connecticut, telling those great stories of people long ago. Who knows, perhaps you'll learn about an ancestor or two. Someone you're looking for, you never know who you'll come across or already have. Interested in doing headstone cleanings? This is your opportunity to learn what activity does and what they do with their team. So please welcome Michael Carroll.
How you guys doing? Like young Donna over here said, my name is Mike, Miguel, whatever you want to call me. Never late for dinner, like Lisa knows. So again, like Donna said, I founded Rediscovering History, Inc. I didn't just start it due to COVID or anything like that. I've actually been in historical research now for this is actually my 20th year doing historical research, working everything from Fort Griswold down in Groton, Connecticut, up in the National Archives in Waltham, Mass, and everything in between. As Donna said, this isn't just something that I do just haphazardly, this is my life's work. I go down rabbit holes as different authors, such as Miss Julie knows. You start on one topic, and then an hour later, you're down another one, and you're all over the place. So I apologize if I get diarrhea of the mouth. It tends to happen because I love everything I do, and hopefully you'll get to experience a little bit of that. I'll mix it up a little bit instead of doing a Q&A at the end. If you guys have any questions during, feel free to raise your hand. I don't know all of you, I know some of you. And I am partially hard of hearing, so if I don't catch your name and I mispronounce it, I do apologize. Lisa will control everything here real quick before you go ahead. A little squirrel. This stone that we have here, this is actually located down in New London, Connecticut, at the Antius Cemetery on Hempstead Street. That stone, for Samuel Wright, was not known to be anywhere located. It was about 8 inches in the ground. I jumped about 10 feet in the air when we found it, put it up on Find a Grave, as Donna said. I love Find a Grave. And the family fought me for about 4 months. According to Charles Hale, 32 through 35, doing the cemetery and gravestone inscriptions with his team, this stone was not to be found. There was only the footstone that was known to be located. They said, oh, the headstone's destroyed, or it's lost. Well, no, it was in the ground, just sunk down. They don't grow legs and walk away. It was there. And it's still there. That's actually one of my favorite stones that we ever came across. 1732 is the dated inscription on it. And so just a little bit quick about us. I'm not going to go into too depth here. Again, we started 2020. We started just as a 501c3 nonprofit with the state of Connecticut and then the IRS. We have won a couple of different awards. The one that we love the most is Preservation Connecticut. It means the most to us out of all of them. And we work in Connecticut, Mass, New York, Rhode Island, now Pennsylvania. One of my friends the other day asked me to come down to North Carolina, so that would be terrific. It probably takes a little bit of planning. As you know, can't just run there. And the big thing, cemeteries and burying grounds, which we're going to get into a little bit of that, isn't just what you see above ground. And I'm not talking about the bodies in the ground. I'm talking about the stones that are in the ground as well. If you look on Find a Grave and you see a cemetery, and it might say it's 80% photographed, that's photographed above ground and what they can read. There are stones that are either lost to the sands of time, or again, are in ground or just so dirty they can't read them, so they haven't been photographed before. When we talk about cemeteries, we have burying grounds, and then your original graveyards. Most of these don't apply to the US anymore. They apply mainly to the UK. It's where you have churches attached, the burying ground attached to the church. So those are known as graveyards. That's where everything really started. In the UK, they only have a 100-year rule. What I mean by that is, after 100 years, and sometimes less, they can take you out of that spot and then reuse that spot for somebody else. In the US, we have laws prohibiting that. So we just talked to someone the other day. They said, why would you pay respect to someone from 3 generations ago? That, the stone's probably gone. Why would you still go there? Well, some of the family still cares about their loved ones. But in the UK, you'll go there 10 years later and that person's gone and someone else brand new in that spot. It's a little sad. Burying grounds. So burying grounds apply a lot to this area especially. So burying grounds and even cemeteries, which is on the next one. Burying grounds are when you died, you had to go in the ground. So they had so much sickness and disease around, they didn't have time to wait for a plot to open up like we do nowadays. So when you got buried, it might be 1 foot down, 2 foot down, or if you see those mounds above ground, they lay them on the ground level and then put the dirt over the top of them. So if you start messing around with those, you're probably going to find something you don't want to find. In some of our work, which I didn't share the pictures, but some of the work that we've done, 2 seasons ago, I was resetting a headstone in Essex, Connecticut, which is one of our main areas. And as I got the stone out of the ground, we were hitting human remains. And that's because the stones have been moved. So here in burying grounds, they would have had headstones and footstones. that would have told you what the length of the body. In modern times, there's no need for a footstone. They just have the headstone because they have dedicated plot lines. Back then, they didn't. So when they moved these headstones and footstones around, they didn't know where some of these bodies were, and they were putting them right on top of them. And so I had to call Sarah Sportman, the state archaeologist. She came out a week later. Sure enough, we were hitting even more human remains, and we buried them 2 or 3 feet down from there. Next one. And cemeteries. So this is your modern. So if you know the Stonington Cemetery, that's the big, beautiful one in this area. That's a cemetery. That's a proper cemetery. You have dedicated plots, mausoleums, all sorts. It's absolutely gorgeous. Again, burying grounds. You're probably in the woods. Most of them are in the woods, or just long-lost places that people really haven't visited in many years. We come across a lot of them to where they might have 40, 50 feet worth of debris to get into them, or the stones are all gone, and there's just the remnants of what was there before. Cemeteries, you're going to find mostly marble. I'll go into those a little bit here as well. You really don't have the older stones, and if you do, they've probably been moved from another location into that. What I mean by that is Cedar Grove Cemetery in New London. If you pull into Cedar Grove, you have their beautiful building right in front of you. To the left of you, if I'm not mistaken on the names, I'll vice versa, is the second burying ground. So the second burying ground was further away in New London, and in the late 1800s, they put out an article in the newspaper, an advertisement, we're gonna do something with this land, any descendants, come out, take the stones, bring them here, take the remains and bring them as well. They'll move them. Well, most of them they didn't, and they just moved the stones. The rest of them that were left behind, they just blew over. In that same yard in Cedar Grove, on the right-hand side when you pull in, that's the third burying ground. There you'll see all the stones almost on top of each other, side by side. There's no burials there. They like to say there is, but there really isn't. It's quite unfortunate. So, gravestones that we come across, these are all the ones that we're going to come across. We have field stones. So field stones are your very first ones. Those usually are for people that didn't have the money to pay for a headstone, and they're just simple rocks. They might be faintly carved around on the sides. In very rare cases, you might have initials or maybe even a year. And it's not like a modern stone where it's well-defined. They're scratched in there. So they're very tough. We actually saw one in Mystic recently, to where I was working on a stone, didn't see anything. Well, later in the day, the sunlight changed and it hit that stone. And as I walked by, there was the year plain as day. So lighting plays into a lot of it as well. And it wasn't a trickery of the eyes. It was just there. It was just hard to see. Sometimes you see field stones for enslaved people. You might see them for Native Americans. And a lot of times those unfortunately got taken out of the ground. Hey, I'm going to use this in a stone wall. And when you do that, you now lose that burial. So they're very important if you see them in a cemetery or a burying ground to leave them until you're sure exactly what's going on there. Slate, those come from Boston or Newport. Those are beautiful stones. They're light blue or dark purple in color. They tend to have angels on top or cherubs on top in different iconography. Now, I know Donna had mentioned about symbolism. I don't deal too much in symbolism. That's a whole nother field. Part of this, I do know basics on it, but I definitely don't want to represent that I know everything about symbology. But when you look at different things, especially the 1700s, you're looking more like the skull, the death heads, because death is so present. That's all they know. As you start getting away from that into your early to mid 1800s, now you're talking about your willow and your urn, so your mourning period. Death wasn't as present. Now this is a time to mourn. And now in present times, unless you want to have a race car or a fire truck on there, that's about all you get for iconography, is what the family wanted. They don't really have the mourning. They don't have the death heads. I mean, unless your family wants it for you or you desire to have it on your stone, so be it. But now they don't do it like they used to, unfortunately. It's kind of like a lost art. Brownstone. So brownstone started in Portland for the most part, Portland, Connecticut. And you'll find those all over, red sandish color. They tend to flake and fall apart quite easily. They're beautiful to carve. They're very soft materials, but you get freeze-thaw effect a lot of times. And so when the water hits it and it starts freezing and then it thaws, it pops that stone on the inside. So if you go to any of these stones and you see the front part or even the back or the sides cracking and delaminating, it's best not to touch it. And unfortunately, we can do stuff to try to prevent it or to keep it together for that point, but it's going to fall apart over time. So we're really just putting a Band-Aid on it, unfortunately, and that's why they stopped using it. Then it went into marble. So your marble time period is 1840s, 1850s through the modern period. Most of your marble at that time and even now came from southwestern Vermont, northwestern Mass, that kind of area, and they would transport it down. Buda, of course, marble is white stone. You do have different variations. So if you look at some of the older modern, it actually stands up better than some of your modern. So it really depends on the veining and the cuts and things like that. So no stone is alike no matter what. And then you got zinkies. So zinkies are your white bronze that you see. They're hollow. They look like no one's ever cleaned them. They're absolutely gorgeous. Those were done by the Bridgeport Bronze Company, 1880s through 1912, 1920s, in that time period. And they were purchased much like you would have, well, I wasn't around for this, but Sears Roebuck's catalog. That's where you would have bought zinkies in that time period. And then they would all be cast, and those plates on the side of them would have the individual's name, and you would customize that, but the rest of it would fairly be the same. And then, of course, you have granite, which is your modern stones now. So you have flat markers. Those are granite stones. Those are run-of-the-mill, no character unless you want to put iconography, your own touch on them. Most monument companies use those now. They're just so easy, and they're less expensive. Unfortunately, when it comes to restoration, and I'll show you some examples here, most modern monument companies don't want to touch them. Why? Because it's easy for them just to sell you a new stone versus fixing an old stone. One of our friends up in Willington, Connecticut, actually carves stones if the cemetery or association or town wants them to, or the individual, the descendant. He will carve a stone based on the original technique using all hand tools, no power tools. Might take 6 months, might take a year, might take $20,000 or $30,000. If you have that kind of money for a stone, so be it. But his work is phenomenal. That's about the extent of getting getting a newer replacement stone in the old style. Any questions real quick before we go a little further? No questions. Donna, none?
You answered. I was wondering what a zinky was. So.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Tell them the story of the Zinkies.
What do you mean?
Prohibition.
Huh?
Prohibition.
Oh, all right, yeah. Oh, and I got another good story too. So yes.
Aren't some of the carved granite pieces in the Riverbend considered older?
Yeah, so some of them are, but again, a lot of them are backdated too. So even, I don't have the example, and I wish I had thought about that very question. Some of the stones are backdated. So when you died during, 1800s, you didn't get that stone the next day. It might take up to 40 years for you to get a stone. And even at that time, they only had a piece of paper with the notes on it. So where did it go? Well, the marker's gone, so we'll just put it right here. So they weren't completely sure that that's exactly where that person was either. So in Essex, and I'm going to reference them because we do a lot of work there, but in Essex, if you ever go to Riverview Cemetery, it's absolutely gorgeous. The town is gorgeous. Griswold Inn, I'll give them a cheap plug. They're amazing. They have 1, 2, 3 stones for one individual. And they're all different materials, but they're all for that same person, same years and everything else. They were all backdated. But it's not 1, 2, 3. It's one row, then another one here, then another one that way. And so it looks like it's separate burials. And they just weren't sure, and they just kept sticking them wherever they wanted. So some of those, they are older. But when you talk about granite and marble, that tends to be backdated. If they say 1750s, definitely not. Even the 1780s, 1790s, if you see that on a modern stone, it's been backdated. So the story you're talking about, Zinkies and Prohibition, we like to have fun with that. So if you ever go to any cemetery, and you see the tall zinky stones, and you bang on it lightly, and it's hollow, and you see the plaques on all four sides, or two sides, or whatever it is, and in each corner, there's a cover over the screws. Those covers are long rusted on. Please don't put WD-40 on them, it'll ruin them. But during Prohibition time, those were accessible. And so loved ones, I love to tell this story, loved ones would go to the cemetery and they would have a drink with their ancestors and, enjoy the time. And then they see the law coming, oh crap, and they'd unscrew it and they put it in there. And so the law would come, nope, I'm not drinking, I'm fine, I can't, I'm stumbling around, but I'm good, I'm not drinking. And then they'd leave and they'd go back in and take it right back out. And they are hollow, some of them had little shells, the rest just drop all the way in. So nowadays, you'll see some of them with the screws missing where people are trying to get in there to see what's inside. So that's a neat little story about that. About you, though, I got a beautiful story, and I know you're going to hate me for this. So I've only been married for going on 7 months, all right? I'm going to be 44, so I got a long way to go. I know some of you probably been married many years. You look young, right? You're probably early 20s? 19. Close enough. All right, you're not married, right? So you want a good piece of advice? How do you find your loved one? How do you find someone you know is great for you? Do you know how? No, you be serious, right? You be romantic, take her out for a date. What if you take her to a cemetery, you ask her to trust you, you ask her, hey, Lisa, hold my hand, right? So you hold her hand, you trust me, right? That's her first mistake, okay? So I did that. Whitehall Cemetery, you guys know Whitehall Cemetery in Mystic, across from the Whitehall Inn. Beautiful location, I've been there for years. So she had never been there. So we pull in, I said, oh, do you trust me? Takes my hand, I lead her into the cemetery. Now the cemetery goes that way, excuse me, burying ground. But it goes to the left. When you walk in, you go straight ahead and to the upper right-hand corner. The right-hand corner is this beautiful stone building. Front door's long been taken down, probably by vandals, unfortunately. And so she still had her eyes closed. And I'm leading her in. We're walking in. And I said, well, at this point, you got to turn around, you got to bend down slightly and walk backwards. Go down the stairs. She's like, all right, where the heck are we, though? And so we walk in, the door's here, burying grounds that way. Said, all right, I'm going to take the phone out so I don't break it. I said, all right, now sit down. So she sits down. Said, now open your eyes. Like, all right, what's going on here? Where's the burying ground? I said, well, it's right out there. I said, see the stones out there? It's beautiful. She's like, yeah, but where are we? I said, well, funny story, darn it. I said, in the 1800s, when the ground was too frozen, much like it is now, they needed somewhere to put the bodies because they couldn't put them in the ground. That stone slab you're sitting on, that's where the bodies were. She's been with me ever since. That's how you find a good woman right there.
Took me to the morgue.
Pretty much.
That's love. That is love.
Yeah, that's complete love right there. And so I'll go a little bit into cleaning techniques and the things to use, because if you look online, and of course Suzanne knows, and some of the people that do work in cemeteries and burying grounds, they know. If you look online, you're going to find 10 different ways to do one thing correctly. And you're going to make 9 different mistakes when you shouldn't have made any at all. So people say it's okay to make mistakes, and yes, you learn from them. However, that mistake you do might be doing more damage than you ever wanted to do. So the biggest thing to do, other than permission, is to use soft bristle brushes, use plastic scrapers, wooden skewers, hand pump sprayers, water, of course permission, and D2 biological cleaner. So that's provided by Atlas Preservation out of Stonington, Connecticut. But even when you go to a stone to work on it, other than your permission, you gotta make sure the temperature is right. So you want at least 40, Atlas says 40 degrees. They're a big company, you know them, of course. I'm not a fan of that. If you do the stone at 40 or 45 degrees, what about underground? It's probably frozen still. So you never want to work on a stone where the ground is frozen. So for me, I work on stones 50 degrees or above, 55 or above. So my season's getting ready to kick off maybe March, I hope, if not April. And I run right through October, November. But you also want to make sure you're not working in too hot a temperature. What I mean by that is we've gone to some places, wow, it's, 75, 80 degrees, and we go 2, 3 hours away and it's 110 degrees. And 5 minutes later, we have to stop. So if you have too hot of a day and you put water on that stone, you could snap it. And vice versa, if it's too cold and you use hot water, which you would never do, but if you did, you could also snap it. You also have to inspect the stone, make sure it doesn't have cracks, make sure it's not delaminating, any of those things, because anything you do to it, you're responsible for. Whatever nature does, we can't prevent it. At least we can prevent what we're doing on it. So this is a stone, again, in Essex, and I'll move out of the way so little Suzanne can see it. And so this is a stone that I had fun with. This is just a common single lane break. This is an old repair. You can see the concrete or whatever they put up there many years ago, and it failed. It definitely wasn't the right material. So now when we do it, we put a 2-part epoxy on this stone. It is approved. Everything we do is set to the national standards that you would see at Arlington. Tried and true methods as well. And again, things are always changing, so we're constantly learning. I never want to be called an expert. To me, an expert means you know everything, there's nothing else to learn. I'm always learning. So we get this stone out of the ground. Of course, that's fun digging that out. Clean this whole stone, we clean the breaks on it, and then it comes up looking like this. So we actually had to recreate the base for it because the base, which it should have had, was long gone. It was probably broken. They got rid of it and just jammed it in the ground. This, again, is in Essex. And you can see the way it was before. This is the way it is after, and now it is even cleaner. This picture is about a year ago. Once we clean it and put the D2 on it, it takes 6, 7, 8 months to really start to look good. As you can tell in the difference, that's probably 4 or 5 months right there. But again, now it looks a lot better. And even the marble dust that we put on the outside, that actually lightens up over time. So it looks dark in this picture now, but that's when we first did it. Now when you go and you see that stone, it looks terrific.
What is the material you used to glue it back together?
So there's a 2-part epoxy that we get. It comes from Germany. It's Achypox 5010 and 5030 are the numbers on it. It comes in many different varieties. The way that we get it, there's a 2-part canister. Lasts for quite a long time, and we can do a number of stones with it. But even when we do it, I have to sit there and chisel any remaining old stuff off. We never put a wire or brush on the face of the stone. I only do it to the break part, and that allows me to get any dust or dirt off of it, but it creates a fine groove in there. You can't really see it to the naked eye, but it's there and it allows the epoxy to sit in there. And even when I put that epoxy in there, I make sure it doesn't come out the sides, because once it does, I can't get it off. And you don't need, that means you're using way too much. So we put a thin level in it. I put bracing on both sides. I put clamps, leave it there for a few weeks, depending on the weather. If it's gonna rain, I'll cover it with a tarp or a garbage bag, because the water will affect it as well. Any other questions? Well, no questions. Quiet crowd. So this is a stone that is in Babcock Cemetery. You know exactly where this one is, off Mystic Ave in Stonington. So this stone had never been photographed. This is actually one of my biggest breaks that we had to fix. So if you see on top of Nancy, on the far left, you see that black part up there. That was all that was sticking out of the ground. The stone is white. This picture is after, of course, but the stone is white because we had just put water on it and started to lightly clean it. All of that was underground. Even the bottom part of the stone was completely underground. So we started probing around. I have a soil probe. It's T-bar soil probe in the car, always with me because you never know where you're going to go, right? And that's why we have a shovel there too. And so we laid it out here, and everything we do, we dry fit it. And that allows us to see exactly how it comes together, if I'm missing anything, if I have to recreate any parts of it. And then so we start doing that. And this even took a couple of months. I believe this was August 2023. The ending was September, October 2023. But even when we did this, we had to really be careful with it. And we had to start with putting that base piece in the ground first, which of course you see here, and then build it from there and have everything together. The only thing I never put the marble mix over is the lettering, because once I cover that lettering, it's gone. So I'd rather have a little bit of a crack there, so at least the lettering stays existing.
So all that was visible was that little piece at the top.
Yeah, just where it's black up there, that's it.
How did you come upon and decide to pick this stone to examine? How did you get to?
Because there's something there.
Say that again?
There's something there. See, I can go to a spot and you'll test, and Larry, my friend Larry, if he was here, he's from Washington, he's in St. Kitts right now, lucky guy. But I can go to a spot and say, there's a stone there, just based on the topography. And get on my hands and knees, I'm 6'10" and a half, but being 5 foot down in the ground, I absolutely love it. She's ready to put me in the ground anyways. And so, when I see something like that sticking out of the ground, I know there's something more there. And I will start working. I won't just rip apart the ground. I try to probe around and see what's there. And based on the sounds and the vibrations, it's almost like I call it like a guitar for a musician. They know that instrument, it's finely tuned to them. They can pick it up and they're ready to go. I pick up my T-bar soil probe, I can put it in the ground and I can tell you, okay, that's a root 7 inches down, that's a stone, that's a skull, someone's mad at me. I can't detect that yet. But that's how I go about it. And so that's what we did there. And like I said, the rest of it was even worse than that, to try to find it. You know, this bottom piece of marble is probably 150, 200 pounds, something like that.
This was the one that was inverted.
What's that?
This was the
No,
one-
this was not the one that was inverted. That was for Joshua Babcock? Oh, Joshua Hazard? Yeah. So that was the one that was inverted. In this same burying ground, there was a stone, it just had a little piece out of it sticking out of the ground, just a little part. And I knew exactly what it was. I knew, okay, it's probably, I figured it was, it was the bottom of the stone. So like this, here, maybe it was just this corner sticking out of the ground. So we start digging into this thing. Well, Connecticut is really known for having potatoes, AKA rocks, in the ground. And around that base, what I thought was the base, we were getting roots. So we're sitting there hacking at this thing for, I don't know, a couple hours, you know, trying to get this out of the ground safely. So we get it out of the ground, and there's a video, I didn't put it up here, but there's a video of me being really stupid and dorky, and I'm sitting here on my knees, and I have this stone, and I flip it over, and it's actually the top of the headstone. And so that stone had never been documented in that yard. We knew he was buried there, but no one had laid eyes on it. So over the years, it had fallen over. For whatever reason, they took it, jammed it in the ground, and all I saw was just a little corner of it. And that stone is now standing. You're descendant, right?
But he was related to the Baptist.
Yeah, yeah. But I think he's in Westerly Riverbend, right?
There was his family.
Yeah. And so that was one of the other stones that we did. So when I see something in the yard and it doesn't look correct, I will go full bore. As long as I have permission, I will absolutely find the stone in the ground. It's just something I love doing. Yes.
About permission.
Yeah.
When you go to a cemetery, are you giving a general permission to do whatever you want? Or-
For the most part.
Because you found this piece of stone, you
Yeah.
have to then go back and ask for permission to,
Nope. So if I go to a town, Salem, Connecticut, our very first one that we worked on, Salem, Connecticut said, sure, have all our cemeteries, we don't care. So I technically have permission. We've done tons of work in Salem, Connecticut. But when I work with a cemetery or a town or association, I say, listen, this is what we are looking to do. I generally don't, I don't have a better term, I don't deal with modern stones because most family is still around. And a lot of times family don't want people working on their family, for their relatives. I deal with stones from the 17 and 1800s. I will work on modern and have worked on modern if family asks me to. So when I work with a cemetery or a town or what have you, I say, this is what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna reset, repair, clean, and that's what I get permission on. And if we find something, yes, if I find human remains, I have to call the state archaeologist and have her come out. If I find, occasionally I found pottery in the ground, maybe offerings that over time had sunk down, I've turned those over to museums or historical societies. We never keep anything. I do have one thing next door, and we'll see over there in a minute. Well, whenever it is, I don't have the time offhand. We do have a coffin handle from the 1800s. That came from Old North Burying Ground in Hartford. And they have what we like to call critters that run all around and dig in the ground, and they love using the coffin or the graves as a natural bedding because, well, it's squared out for them. Well, they take all the things that are in there and kick them out. So if you ever go to an old burying ground and you see piles of dirt, you might want to start sifting through there. There's probably things in there. As we were in Hartford, we're looking through, there's piles of dirt, there's a coffin handle. So I knew instantly it was about 1850s, 1860s in that area, maybe up towards the 1880s. I said, guys, what are you going to do with this? And they're like, we're going to throw it away. I'm like, can I keep that? Like, it's kind of a neat little educational piece, you know? And they're like, yeah, sure. So I brought it home. I don't have any human remains at home. We have found urns and things like that. She freaks out. Again, I still have her, so that's a good thing. But we tend not to keep things, just it's disrespectful. I don't metal detect in cemeteries. Not only is it illegal, it's highly unethical, so we won't do that at all either. So some of the work, and you talked about how do I know where to look. So this is, again, in Essex, but this is another stone. This middle section right here is a marble stone. I had the top of it, and I said, well, there's got to be the rest of it somewhere. So we started digging down. I started probing. I thought I had a slotted base around this stone. Well, I didn't. So when we talk about stones being backdated, this wasn't backdated. This is actually the original stone. So what they did is this stone had broken off. This is a brownstone. And so this would have been much longer. And it had broken off here at the seam. And then they had actually cut the stone in the middle. You can see the middle taken out, and they took it as a collar around a newer marble stone. And then they went and made a new marble stone for this gentleman, put that in the cemetery, and then buried this one. And so we brought this out, and it was very important to bring this out because it's part of history. And so this is actually going to be on display. The Pratt House. In their barn, they have a couple of other examples that were too damaged to go back out. This is going to be one of them. We've never found anything like this before. So that was just one of those moments. I'm jumping 15 feet into the air. I think Larry was with us that day. It was just a phenomenal day. So to put your hands on something from the 1700s, I think this was 1753 or 1758 that was dated. And they had just used it as a collar for another stone. So again, with its reproduction stone standing, we don't know that that's where it actually belongs. And that's why we're hitting human remains, unfortunately. Yes?
So you say when you find an area that you think is a good prospect to find a burying ground or a graveyard, who do you seek permission from?
So the town, so in the state of Connecticut, most modern cemeteries have cemetery associations attached to them. So I'll go through them. If they grant me permission, great. If they don't, well, that's their choice. They don't have to. There's no law saying someone knocks on your door, you have to let them in. However, when it comes to these old burying grounds, now, an abandoned burying ground, and I follow till I'm blue in the face, the Connecticut General Assembly laws on cemeteries, you know as well. So in the state of Connecticut, they are considered abandoned after 100 years since their last burial. And those are the ones mostly in the woods. You might see them on the side of the road. I actually got to talk to you, Christy, about one we just came about. I was like, there's one, we got to show Christy. And so for those, I go to the town, whether it's the first selectman, the mayor, I might go to the town clerk, whoever I need to. Now, in the Connecticut General Assembly laws, and most town people don't realize this, those abandoned ones are supposed to, the care and the edict of those is by the person in charge. So again, a lot of them, Salem's like, we don't care, we don't have any general interest. Well, no, technically you're supposed to. And so I'm working with a couple of lawmakers to close that loophole to make these towns responsible, because this is all part of history. Most of them are like, there's no descendants around. Well, how do you know that? So I go and get those permissions. Even though they're in the woods, I won't work on anything without permission. I would love to work on some of them that we've come across. We did a tour in Voluntown on one that took me 7 years to be able to even locate, which we still never put public. But again, it's all in conjunction with the towns. Yes?
So I've got both a question and a little information. I live on Elm Street in Stonington, and many people are familiar with the old Velvet Mill. The Velvet Mill is American Velvet, and Bayview Avenue goes next to the Velvet Mill from Elm Street. If you come up Elm Street to Bayview Avenue, and you take a right and go down the hill, right at the very end of it, there's a graveyard. And a number of my ancestors are buried in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know who keeps it up.
Well, see, here's the thing. So some towns take care of the maintenance, meaning the landscaping aspect. They might even have a budget for it. When it comes to family stones, you could be 10 generations down. If you're able to, you know for a fact, okay, this is my 8th great grandfather, technically your family still owns that stone, and you have the right of care, meaning you can dictate whether yourself works on it or somebody else works on it. But again, you still want to let the town know, because I've heard of instances of people just going and doing stuff on their own, and then the police get called. Because the town's not aware, they think they're vandalizing. Funny story, I was in the Antiest in New London on Hempstead Street, right next door is a school, and it was probably 8, 9 in the morning, and I had permission from the town to be there, and I'm doing my work. And I look over, and there's this woman dropping off her kids, and she's just staring at me. And I'm thinking, what's going on? Do I look weird? Just working on some stones. I had the tarp laid out to catch the dirt. And she's just watching me. So I had the music going on my phone in my back pocket. Don't think anything of it. 5, 10 minutes later, I hear someone come up behind me. It was a London trooper. He's like, what's going on? I'm like, and I'm working on some stones. He's like, yeah, I got a report you're digging up a body. I'm like, it's 9 in the morning. Like, not the right time of day. Do you see a body? And then here comes more troopers. And when they were 5 minutes, I'm giving them a tour of the cemetery, talking about the history. The woman sitting there just scowling, and she would look so mad, and I wanted to be like, ha, sucker, But I had permission. But again, if I didn't have permission, it would have been really bad for me. So you always want to have it. And, it is tough because we do get no's. I get 1,000 no's before I get a yes. And it's frustrating, but I don't give up. It doesn't mean I bang on their door constantly, but good things happen to those that wait. So some of the yards that I really want to work in, it's still, even now, I don't have that permission. Maybe down the road I will. Any others? So this little story I didn't even tell you about. So I do a lot of research work. I have a vast library at home. You can attest to it. It was supposed to be a mutual office turned into Mike's office. I have barrister bookcases full going back to the 1700s to the 1800s, all original books, paperwork, newspapers, you name it. Again, I'm an absolute dork when it comes to history. And so I do a lot of work on Find a Grave, and I put bios of people on there. Now, again, it's not to be taken as a definitive, because there's always some new information coming to light. But it's a good starting ground, especially when people don't have the information. And so I'm going through the ledger, one of the ledger books that I have, which I unfortunately didn't bring. But this was interesting. I said, I got to do a nice little story. So if you take a minute and read that, and especially read those bottom 3 lines. So we all know Benedict Arnold is, right? This traitor, we have to burn his effigy in Norwich, he's no gooder, And so I said, well, wouldn't it be nice to try to prove this story, And this was written by a descendant. Unfortunately, she's now gone, and her husband is as well. She died, I think it was 2017, he was 2020. This was written in 93. It's just an excerpt from this gentleman's biography. So go to the next page, Lisa. So we find out who his brother is. This is just a couple of pages later. And so we even talk about Benedict Arnold here as well. Well, we talk about supercargo. And what is supercargo? I never heard the term before, and like I said, I've been researching 20 years. Donna, I don't know if you've ever heard of it. But again, these are terrific stories about individuals. Maybe we can do something more with it. Well, so we have the supercargo at the next one. We now learn supercargo was Benedict Arnold, because he was an apothecary. And that's what they were calling at the time. So if we take both of those stories, and if you read, this is again another excerpt from the second one. He sailed the ship, brought it back after presenting the remedy, which didn't work. Well, he brought it back, and instead of saying, well, this is who owned the ship, just brought it back and walked away. So what happened to those two brothers? We don't know where they are. They're probably buried at sea. Did Benedict Arnold murder these two? It could very well have been true. We do have it from a descendant. Again, it's not just, a story that she told. This descendant, again, now gone, was with the Mayflower Society for 20 years. She was working for them for a very long time doing genealogy, not just for her family, but for others. So her provenance of information was very, very good. This book was published in 93. So it's something to, look into a little more, and just a neat little chapter on Benedict Arnold that we don't really talk about other than what we already know. I could sit here and talk about William Ledyard. I love William Ledyard. Do I believe he was stabbed with his own sword? Yes, but he wasn't stabbed in the chest. If you see the painting at the Groton Town Hall, if I'm not mistaken, they have the mural. It's a big, beautiful mural, shows him being stabbed in the chest and falling backwards, and that's all great, except he wasn't stabbed in the chest. I've actually gotten to see his clothing in person, thank God. It was a tremendous moment. Got to hold Benedict Arnold's sword, which is in New London. Not that he used that one, but one of the majors for the British did stab him through the side, not the chest, but the chest sounds so glorious. And again, that's a whole nother story from there. So we have this information, and what is great, not just with cemetery work, but also research work. It ties together. And now this information is actually on both Ledyard brothers on their Find the Grave pages. So it just adds more. And if you know Ancestry owns Find a Grave. And so every 3 or 4 months, they take that information and pull it into Ancestry. So now this information, in a couple of months, is going to be out there for the masses to see and maybe tie in. And maybe someone's like, oh, I have that same story or a different version of it. And now it just adds more and more information. Go ahead. So one of the biggest things that we do, again, is permission, permission, permission. I can't stress that till I'm blue in the face. Well, I probably could, but it's no fun. Again, if you don't have permission, you just set yourself up for failure. And once you have a bad rap, you went out there and did something, and maybe you damaged something, it's just not good. And you're never going to get work afterwards. And people say, well, it's easier to ask for, forgiveness after. No, because if you damaged something and did $10,000 worth of work, a simple I'm sorry isn't going to fix that. But network, talk to people like Donna, talk to people like young Suzanne, young Christy over here. I don't know the people with her. Is that her? That's what I thought. I wasn't sure. I'm like, I don't know if that's her brother. I never met him before. But just always network. Even young Julie here, who wrote awesome books, so just different ways to put things in, almost like a community event. If people want to come out and work with us, we invite that. So we're all over. Like I said, our season's about to start up again. We do work a lot in Connecticut, but again, if people want to travel and go places, we're open to that as well. Find us on Facebook. We have a group page set up. You're not even on my friends list. No, and we got to change that. Yeah. But, so come on our Facebook group page, it's Rediscovering History, Inc. You'll see us on Google. If you Google us, you'll see all sorts of articles, news, interviews that we did. And so there's tons of information. It's not just what we present. We want other people to be able to take information and put it on there as well and really share as a community. Is there any questions? Yes.
Do you find these stones that are sunken,
Yeah.
are they relatively a vertical position? I mean, do they just
Yeah.
literally sink?
For the most part, unless, so a lot of times they sink because of the soil, whether it's moisture getting in there or critters getting in there making voids, but usually they sink straight up and down. Sometimes they do fall over, but usually that's due to people walking up and kicking them. Oh, this is fun. And so that happens too. But again, if the stone is missing, they don't grow legs and walk away. When they fall over, gravity's still pulling those down. Even now, when I reset them, we always put a foundation under it. So a foundation is pea stone with dirt combination like a cake. And it allows for drainage, but it makes it a lot tougher. But overall, I can't stop gravity. So gravity over the years is still going to pull these down. We're just trying to reset them now to where 10, 20 years later, okay, someone else is taking charge and maybe this one needs to be fixed again. Maybe there was some water coming in here a lot more than we expected and it made it lean a certain way. Sometimes they lean side to side again too. So for the most part, they're straight up and down, thankfully, because they tend to be 300, 350 pounds, and we just use my back and pick them up. So,
And a tripod,
in tripod, but for the most part, my back,
because you're stubborn.
Any other question? Well, yes. Any other questions? No questions. Donna?
Question,
Yes.
I always have questions.
Yeah, well,
When I've looked at old cemeteries,
mm-hmm.
like the one, the ancientest burial
Yeah.
ground in London, the really old ones seem to be, the tombstones seem to be facing east. So I'm
Yep.
thinking, okay, the sun comes up, that must be a way that the relatives think I want my dead folks to be warm.
So in the old burying grounds like that one, they would have been facing east. And the reason why, and the footstones would have been set behind it, the stone would have been facing east. And so the reason behind that is the Puritan aspect that when Gabriel blows that horn for you to go to heaven, you know which way to get up and go. So think of it as your bed. You have a headboard and a footboard. And your footboard, of course, it's not setting east, but same principle. You know which way to get up and go. What our friends like to say, well, unless you were a bad person, you were a British, they'd bury you backwards so you're last in line. So that's why. And so if you ever go to an old burying ground, you see the stones all facing one way, they're probably east. If they're not east, it tells you they've been moved. Also, you would have had your headstone and your footstone on opposite ends. So you would have been able to read your headstone this way and your footstone this way. That way there you don't step on the body. So if that footstone spun around or the headstone spun around, you know they've been messed with. But they should be outwards. And so we did in Mansfield at the Pink Cemetery on Gurley Road, as well as Essex, which has turned into a huge project. They were missing 95% of their footstones. We said, where'd they go? Well, they got the water there, maybe they're in the water. No, and they're not in the wall. They buried them in the ground. So in the 1920s and 30s, they said, oh, these things, they're so annoying. They're probably for babies anyways or child. No one cares about them. So they took them up and they buried them in the ground. And we didn't realize that in some of these places until I was working on getting the headstone out, digging down to give it a nice proper size, and like, oh yeah, there's a stone 12 inches down, there's a stone 3 foot down or 4 foot, whatever it is. And so we start working on those, and we got permission. Now the ones in Essex, we had 800 stones. Now it's turned into almost 1,500 stones. And we've been there this is our 4th year now. We're actually wrapping up that project ahead of America 250, but then we have many more coming up as well. But even though some of the headstones, either the faces are gone or the stone is gone itself, the footstone tells you who that person was, and in most cases has the name. And because they've been in the ground so long, they look terrific, and people are like, just keep it in the ground. I'm like, yeah, because that's what it was meant for? Like, no, people paid money to remember their loved ones. They're not meant to be in the ground. I won't name the town, we just spoke with the town, we're gonna be doing work there, and they have a bunch of field stones, and again, some of them are faintly carved, but they need to be raised up to their proper height. A lot of those are pointed down, so they just take it and jam it in the ground, but again, gravity's pulling them. Well, Department of Public Works and all their brightness said, yeah, don't work on those. We're like, what do you mean? Yeah, but that's gonna be more work for us, because now we have to go around those stones. I'm like, I don't care about you and your work. Pay respect to, and this is AmeriCode 250, pay respect to everybody. People say to me, how do you decide what you work on? Do you pick and choose and this and that? And depending on what it is, I may, but for the most part, no. Because I don't care who you were, what you did in life, up to a certain point. And the same thing, death doesn't care either. It's coming for all of us. Regardless of your skin color, your age, whatever, it's gonna come for us all. So if death doesn't care, why should I? So I'll work on any stone no matter what. Any other questions? Yes, in the far back.
Can you recognize the work of certain more well-known stonecutters?
Yeah, so a lot of them are, we still don't know because there's imitations, and there's many imitations of some of these people. Jonathan Hartshorn, so easily my favorite. So if you go to the the old Norwich Town Burying Ground in Norwich, we did work there. You'll find a bunch of Jonathan Hartshorn stones. And his are a small face at the upper top in the middle, and it looks like big rabbit ears. That's Jonathan Hartshorn. Usually his are priced too, and when we did the work there for a couple of months, we were resetting them, and I was finding prices. So the prices aren't in dollars, they're in shillings. So it might be 40 shillings, it might be 15. Well, if it's a lower price shilling, that's for a child. If it's 40 or 50 or whatever shillings, that's probably for an adult. And it wouldn't even say shillings. It would just say S40 or S15 in the lower corner on the bottom where it meets the ground. So we put those above, and those are a great educational piece to see. You got Bartlett, Gershom Bartlett. So Gershom Bartlett out of Manchester did some beautiful stones. His faces almost look like light bulbs, very bulbous heads. They come down to bottom, elongated chin almost. And the bottom of his chins are fish hooks. Well, they look like fish hooks. And so you know it's Gershom Bartlett, a big cartoon nose. They stand out. They're very easy to recognize. If you see his footstones for those individuals, on the footstone itself where you have the name, you have 3 triangles. When you see that, that's Gershom Bartlett all day. Even though he had imitators, those are definitively his. And of course, people changed as they went. But those are 2 of the more prominent ones. And of course, there's many carvers. You'll see next door when we go over there, like I said, I have a bunch of books. We have the carver's book, a couple of different ones, and they talk about these carvers, but again, we don't fully know who they were unless one day we find a probate record, which, good luck. Any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, when you do your work and you have your permission and you say a lot of these things haven't been documented, you document it and then what happens to it?
So I photograph everything before, during, and after, and sometimes multiple times. And even if I come back and, okay, I might have to re-clean it, then so be it. I still document it. I take everything, I put it on Facebook. The work we do in Essex, I actually have to take it, put it on my computer. That's not my computer, but I put it on the computer, put it in the Google Drive. I have everything listed by name, last name, then first name. And then I send it off to them in a Google Drive, and they're able to view it at their pleasure. But I also do documentation of write-ups. So we're actually working on mapping projects to where the part that we're working on in Essex doesn't have a map. So the rest of the cemetery, all modern, has a map. The ancient section, it just says ancient section. We don't have any plots whatsoever because they didn't have plots. So I'm actually we've been working for 2 years, working and measuring every single area and then documenting each stone and transcribing every single stone as we go, and then photographing it, and then I have to take all that and put it into the system that I built, and then every month or every 2 months I send it off to them.
I think she meant more the stones that we find that,
Yeah, everything gets photographed, and so it goes on Find a Grave, but it also goes to the town, or if we are working with the descendant, they get that information. I never keep it just to myself. We allow everyone to see it. The Historical Society, whoever wants it can have it. Even the pictures on Find a Grave, people will say, well, you need my permission. And I'm like, I don't care. To me, I don't own these pictures. they're of, probably some of the only pictures that people have seen of these graves. Share it with the world, share it with whoever wants it. You don't need my permission. Any others? Yes?
Where would you go if you wanted to get a high level of education for proper techniques when working with these?
For what?
Schooling for working with stones. Schooling to be taught, education for working with these stones.
So there is no higher education other than working with the people who do it. But again, you got to be careful because while people may have the best of intentions, they may not that, I don't want to be stroking ego, but a lot of times people don't have that correct information. They see TikTok videos or YouTube videos and, okay, but they don't take all these other elements into account. And so when you do that, you have to be careful who you're working with. There's also people that like to put their hands on something and get a photo and say, oh, look at what I did, and then they walk away afterwards. They're not actually doing the work. They think it's going to bring fame and fortune, and my pocket can attest it doesn't bring fortune. It's a labor of love. It's something I enjoy. I don't always get paid for what I do. And while, she might be like, well, maybe we should charge for this, sometimes I don't. But to bring respect and honor to those before us, I think that's the important thing. Anyone that pays us, whether it's a town or association, so be it. But that's enough to usually pay for some of the supplies. It doesn't pay for everything, Yes.
Many moons ago, I went to Weathersfield and somebody was in the grave sites there and they said, oh, just use shaving cream.
Yeah.
to clean
Yeah,
up
of course,
the
right?
sites." And I thought, well, I'm not going to
No.
touch anything. But then I was able to, and I would highly recommend if Larry and Mike do any presentations. I've gone to the Quaker Cemetery and I've done the other one off Shore Road. So I've actually gone and watched them and had them educate me about the materials and the tools and the
Yeah.
chemicals and those kinds of things, and that's what you really want to.
Yeah, we're going to be setting up, so my Facebook group page, we have the featured tab up there, and I put our schedule, this is up there, I put our schedule up there as we go, and usually set it for the year. And of course, things change, maybe it's raining one day, we didn't expect it. But we address all those changes on there. But we do cleaning classes, and so, like you were saying, you learn about it and you get hands-on that way. But even when we're out there doing the work, people are more than welcome. I'll say, okay, we're heading to XYZ Cemetery, and that's just a random name. And so we're working here, come out and join us. And if you want to just come out and shoot the breeze and talk, so be it. We have no problem with that. If you want to get hands-on, prepare to get dirty, prepare to have a bunch of fun. Again, I like to have music going. I like to enjoy myself. And we've had times where we've had kids out there. And so I'm digging a hole 5 foot down and drop the kid in there, not drop him, but place the kid in there. Oh my God, and I'm like, you're fine, it's not a grave. But I like to have fun with it because we're talking about life and death. So very scary topic, especially, for some people that may have things going on, okay, especially for children, they don't understand it. So we try to make it, safe for them and appropriate for them, but you enjoy what you're doing. Yes?
What got you into this line of work?
So what it got me into it is, that one just died. I was actually, when I was younger, I grew up in Stafford Springs, and so we didn't have video games or anything like that. I was always at the speed track, or I was at the library, just enjoying it and making my own adventure outside. So exploration and reading, that started at a young age. And then when I was in Norwich a number of years ago, we were walking, me and a friend of mine were walking around, enjoying the sights, and we seen a stone on the outside of the wall, and it was for a military person in the Civil War. And I said, well, why is that stone out there? We couldn't figure it out. Had the fence around the cemetery, but that stone's out there. And it wasn't just thrown there, it was properly stood up there. So I saw an old wooden sign. I figured, the guy's probably gone. Let me look him up online, see if I can find his phone number. Found his phone number, gave him a call. Within 5 minutes, he said, well, come to Salem, Connecticut. I have a burying ground here. And I'm figuring, no, he has some rocks and he thinks it's a burying ground. No, he actually had a proper burying ground, but it had that 40, 50 feet worth of debris to get into it. So again, we talked to Salem, we got permission. and that was it. Light bulb went off, and I said, we can do this. And then you just learn. And so we started really with clearing a lot of overgrowth, things like that. I quickly found out what is the worst thing that's in overgrowth? Poison ivy. And I'm highly allergic to it. A couple years ago, I was in the ER 3 times. So I try now to stay away from it the best I can. If I see it, I'm usually on the other side of the room. Now we've transformed more into repairs, cleaning, resets. I will do some overgrowth as long as I don't see that poison ivy or someone else is taking care of that aspect. Yes?
Were you able to figure out why that burial was outside of the law?
No. Nope, he didn't know either. So unfortunately, a lot of times caretakers, they inherit these yards and they don't have the records. So we were talking, was it you we were talking to? Yeah, the Cemetery Association in Ledyard, that when our young friend Christy here joined, a lot of their records are gone. And, it would be nice to have it, but we don't have that information. So maybe we come across it in Ledyard, well, why is there a gravestone out there? We don't know now. Things get lost to the sands of time, information doesn't get passed down. So it's very important, especially in what we do, take the information and give it to everyone else. And it might seem, wow, it's a lot of information. I'm like, yeah, but try doing this 20 plus years and having all that information, it's got to go somewhere. So otherwise it's just gone, and that's just not good either. So unfortunately, there's just some cases where we're not able to figure out what's going on. It would be nice to bring it in, but if there's a burial, now that's a whole new set of things. We can't just dig someone up. Would be nice though, a neat little mantelpiece. No? Yeah, whatever. Yes.
Here's a book you may be aware of called September 6, 1781, North Groton Story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got a basic, other than telling you a great bunch of history, the author laid out where all of the cemeteries and all the headstones were of people who were killed in action or were veterans. You use that as a guide, map, going around to find them. And the other point of interest is up in Yantic, on the Yantic River, there's a stone that is some distance away from the rest of the stones, which I discovered when I went my first day fly fishing a long time ago. And it's a gentleman who murdered and then committed suicide after he killed her.
I know exactly who you're talking about, yeah. Yeah. And so he's not buried up in the upper cemetery part because of that. Right. And so he can't be buried in consecrated ground, so usually they're far away. That book you referenced, September 6th, 1781. So do you believe Stephen Hempstead? You know who he is, right? No. Stephen Hempstead, so he was at the Battle of Fort Griswold. So he wrote the account, the defining account, if you will, in the 1840s in St. Louis, Missouri. Well, and I got flack from the local townspeople on this, but because stories are great, but there's truth to it as well. And so if you read Stephen Hempstead's work in the 1840s, it differs from his war pension information right after the battle. So right after the battle, of course, he's further up and he sees Colonel William Ledyard, be taken down by his own sword. He goes down as well. Well, in 1840s, when he wrote this in St. Louis, and of course, people couldn't fact check the information like they can now. In that time, when Stephen Hempstead was taken down, he fell right next to Colonel William Ledyard. So these things differ, and so there's a lot of misinformation out there and things that aren't correct. He is a patriot, don't get me wrong, but when you put yourself 50 feet away to right next door, you got to start to question some of the other information that's in there as well. I brought that up to local people. I was doing a tour at Fort Griswold a number of years ago. This older gentleman was coming up, yelling at me. He's walking his dog. And he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm running a tour here right now." And he's like, "Yeah, but do you have permission?" I said, "Well, yeah, go right up to that building there and talk to them. They gave me permission." He starts talking about Stephen Hempstead. I'm like, "Oh, crap." And so I start telling him these things, and you don't know what you're talking about. His veins were popping out of his head. You would have thought he was going to turn into Hulk there, And it was just incredible. But it's so protected, that information. especially in that area. I love Fort Griswold. I love September 6, 1781. Very sad time, one of the last battles in the state of Connecticut during the Revolutionary War, the last major one. It's unfortunately not well known outside of this area. You go Rhode Island, New York, and you talk about it, and people really don't know. And it's really a disservice to the people that fought and died in that battle. Any other questions? Yes?
An ancestor of mine fought in that battle. How can I find what cemetery?
So the easiest thing is on Find a Grave. Almost all those people are listed on there, so it's findagrave.com. When you pull it up, they'll ask for the first, middle, and last. You don't need the middle. Middle is if you need it or if you have it. And then it'll ask for a birth year or death year. Again, those aren't necessary, but say William Ledyard, well, there's 1,500 William Ledyards all over the world, because it's not just Connecticut. So it is good to kind of narrow it down. And then it will list what cemetery they're in. However, some people, including myself, I'm guilty, will add people that we don't know where they are. Whether that information is lost, or it was never passed down, or we just now don't know where they are, because they're only referenced in a genealogy book somewhere. I put them on there because they still exist, and I tie them to the family lines because, again, on Ancestry, that's huge. You might have, say, the Ledyard brothers, where their fifth or sixth great-grandfather, John Ledyard, was from the 1600s. He wasn't even listed on Find a Grave. Why? Because no one knew where he was. To me, that's wrong to not have somebody on there because, again, that goes to Ancestry, and so it's really good information to have. But that's the best way.
Point to make, people fought in that battle, some of them were taken prisoners.
Yeah.
Their relatives could
Yeah.
not be buried in the United States.
And some of them are in the Thames River. So there's actually, at the end of where Fort Griswold is, of course, you have the road, and then you have the Thames River right there. When they were dredging there a number of years ago, they were still hitting British ships. And they were finding all sorts of arms and cannonballs, and they would take them, they put them on barges and dump them in the Race at the end, which is terrible. They should have been in a museum and so forth. But some of the people, when they died on those ships, the Jersey ship and so forth, they were just dumped right in the water unceremoniously. So, odds are obviously there's nothing of them left, unfortunately, but that's where they are. If you go to Fort Griswold, you have the redoubt, the triangle that's right there, as you go to enter. So Major Montgomery for the British is actually in the middle of that, not in the upper redoubt, but in the middle of that. Well, his family, because he died in the battle, his family needed, when they were over in England, they needed proof of his death. Well, they came back, lopped off his head, brought that back, and left the rest of them there, and he's still there to this day. When you go to walk in, you have the ditches that are there along the sides. So on that left side, of course, the ground is much higher now than it was in 1781. Well, in 1781, before the British came up, they went into the Avery House. And of course, there were 9 Averys that died in that battle. And so they were robbing the cheese and the wine and so forth and stuffing their pockets ahead of the battle, which is further down the street. Well, when their British comrades died, they still had that cheese and everything in the pocket. They were taking it out. Horrendous, blood and everything on the cheese and bringing that onto the ship. Well, their buddies, they couldn't give them a proper burial because they knew the rest of the Americans were going to come up here. So they just took them, dumped them, and put sand or dirt over them. And for days and weeks afterwards, you were seeing hands and feet and everything stick out. And they're still there to this day, just much further down than the ground is now. Any other questions? Yes?
I just want to make a comment. If you or anybody else is looking for some burial grounds or people that are buried, something you might want to consider looking at are old wills and land records.
Yeah.
Because they do put in their wills quite often, bury me this and make sure it's here, and they tell you exactly where they want to be buried. And then when the land records pass on, sometimes it's mentioned in the land records. So if you can find the wills, a lot of the Connecticut wills are through the Connecticut State Library, and you can access those free on Ancestry. You don't have to have a
And if you have a cemetery or burying ground on your property, Connecticut state law says you don't own it. So even most land records now don't even mention if there's a burying ground in the woods 200 feet from your house. So but just because it's on your property, you don't own it. In Rhode Island, you do, and you need to give permission to anyone trying to come on. If you don't grant them permission, they can't come on. State of Connecticut, there has to be a right-of-way to that burying ground, descendant or not. And again, that's something that a lot of people fight. We have people that say, no, just let them be, don't fight it. Well, the problem is you give them all that power. And good luck getting that power back, because they've had it for 25 years and they're not going to be told anything different, but they really don't own those properties. Well, they own the property, not the burying ground. Yes.
Well, there was a time that, in colonial times, family members were often buried on their own property.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, just recently, President Carter and his wife Rosalind are buried on their farmland under a willow tree in Plains.
And that's a complete exception, because you can't do that now. The health department would have a field day if you try to do that. Yeah, so, Christy actually found a cemetery in, Ledyard. And so it's an old burying ground up in the woods. Well, there's a burial from 2020, if I'm not mistaken. Well, what the heck? What's going on here? And she saw a green old chair sitting there. Well, the wife, who I believe is gone, was going up there and paying respect to her loved one. She lived right there. She had her husband buried there, but didn't tell anyone, and he's a veteran. Didn't tell anyone, but buried him in a small burying ground from the 17 or 1800s. Highly illegal. You're not allowed to do that. Even as an urn, you're supposed to let the health department know, supposed to let the town know, because this opens up, hey, my husband passed 8 years ago, he's somewhere, I don't know where he is, and you actually, took his life. There was a case in Bridgeport, if I'm not mistaken, that someone was out there and they were finding remains of people on the back side of the wall, or the hill, excuse me, and they were finding skeletons and bones and everything. And what was happening, they collected the bones, they brought it to the FBI, sure enough, it's human remains, they had the state police there. They found out that current people, the woman in charge is now gone, but she was digging up people, kicking them out, reusing the plots. Well, they ended up finding 2 murder victims that they didn't even know about that were buried there. Of course, burying in a cemetery, no one's ever going to notice. So you can't just go around burying people. So, yeah. No, not fun, no. Any other questions? No more, you're good. You can have this, young lady.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael. It was very, very informative. I'm going to go this way, yeah. Thank you so much, I appreciate it. It was very, very informative.
Go next door, have fun.
Yes, exactly. So I do want to let everybody know that we do have refreshments next door. Please come join us, have conversation, visit with some friends, make some new friends. Also want to remind you that next Sunday, the first Sunday of next month, March 2nd, I think it is. Yeah, right? We have Jason Casnagway here again. Some of you may have seen him last time he was here, January, December. He's blind since birth. He's a musician and a singer, plays the piano, plays the harp, and he'll be doing a performance here for us, again, free. It'll be the first Sunday in March, 4:30 in the afternoon. April and May, we have Walt Woodward, who is the Connecticut State Historian Emeritus. He's going to be doing a presentation on the theory that Nathan Hale, who was the first spy from Connecticut that was hung, was involved in the burning of New York City during the Revolutionary War. It's a new theory, it's a new presentation. And then he's also going to be doing a presentation as we're starting to head our country into our 250th birthday, another one about Connecticut's involvement in the Revolutionary War as they're moving into Quebec in Canada during the beginning of the Revolutionary War. So please join us next door, and please join us in March, April, and May, and then again in June when we have our church festival. And I just want to say one more time for everybody, please thank our entire committee who's worked so tirelessly to bring this together for everybody. None of this is possible without volunteers. None of this is possible without people like, yeah, my husband. It's not possible without people like Michael and Jason and Walt willing to come and bring their time and their talent